Gauteng, very much, I think, a bellwether for the future of the country. Maurice, you mentioned the National Assembly might look a lot more like this. Parties in and around 30%, 25, 30%, all vying for contestation. You've got your more urban and aspiring middle class in a province like Gauteng wanting to aspire to a better quality of life, wanting your good governance, your service delivery items. Can parties deliver on that? So for those people like myself living in Gauteng, I think if you think things have been complicated, especially in a city like Joburg, get ready for even more complication going forward. Marius, anything to highlight here before I come to you, Karika? Obviously, the ANC coming down from 50% to 34% now, the DA remaining at 27%, and the EFF declining a little bit.
Yeah, like you say, I think this is what South Africa could look like in the next election, the one after that, with an ANC on about 35%, and then, DA 27, 30, somewhere around there, and just a whole bunch of other smaller parties. It's also, I think, we have to go and see what happens with the coalition negotiations. I'm not sure if coalition negotiations will kind of take into account, national and Gauteng, or if they'll leave the provincial negotiations to be separate. So, I mean, there could be a possibility of a ANC-DA coalition at a national level, but then a ANC-EFF coalition in Gauteng, for example. I don't know. Yeah, I'm also living in Gauteng, so it's not something I would particularly like to see. But I think it's made things very complicated. And as that Chinese curse goes, may live in interesting times.
Karika, your thoughts on Gauteng, and I want you to talk a little bit also about Action SA. One of the questions that we have, what is the main reason for their underperformance, especially considering the fact that they did very well in the last local elections, and I'm sure they targeted Gauteng especially in terms of increasing their share in the province and to help them nationally.
Yes, I think for me it was also quite interesting to see Action SA's performance. I also expected them to perform a little bit better. Like you say, exactly because they were performing so well in the local election. So that was also quite interesting to me. As for why they didn't grow, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if on a national level it didn't resonate with voters to have Action SA, as a national party. Maybe it was some of Herman Mashaba's rhetoric itself. Before the election, he's campaigning. Maybe it didn't resonate with especially urban voters, especially him claiming to, reintroduce religion into schools and, such topics. I think maybe it was too, urban voters didn't really resonate with this kind of rhetoric. I think Gauteng's performance also again speaks to the DA being an urban party mostly. As you can see, the blocks that are green are mostly outside of urban centres like Johannesburg or Pretoria, Tshwane. So I think that's also interesting to note. And also interesting is just the EFF's continuous performance in this province, although they did drop 2 percentage points.
Marius, anything from you on Action SA? A lot of rhetoric beforehand focused on the regulation of the polling industry. So I was a bit concerned about their focus. I'm not saying that was their only focus, but yeah, I don't know if I was on the ball enough.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be disappointed with how they did in 2021. They got 2% of the national vote, and that was after standing only 6 municipalities across the whole country. Of course, there were some big ones. It was the 3 Gauteng metros and eThekwini, Durban. So it was a place with big populations. But I think, they probably would be disappointed with this, how they did. But also just getting whatever, I think they got 1.5% vote nationally. They got into the provincial legislatures here in Gauteng and Northwest. I'm not sure if they got in anywhere else, but that's, just looking at it, that's not a bad outcome for them. And it's like same as Raz and Raz Mzansi and Bosa. It gives you a beachhead in Parliament now, and you can start working from there. It's obviously difficult because they're not going to obviously dominate Parliament. They're not going to get much time to talk and be in debates and so on. But it's where you can start showing that you are trying to make a difference. So, I mean, obviously they would be disappointed with this, but that they got into Parliament. They've got a small caucus now, and they can start influencing things. And yeah, we'll see how they go from there. But I think they would be disappointed, especially if you look at how they did in, especially Johannesburg in 2021. compared to how they did now in Joburg in 2024. They've dropped back a bit, and it will be, I think, it is kind of disappointing. They have been also one of South Africa's few real crossover parties. In the 2021 local government elections, they were drawing 10 to 20% of the votes in wards across Joburg, whether they were in Soweto or in Bryanston or in Parkhurst or in, Alex, whatever the case was. The party was drawing support from South Africans of all races and backgrounds. So, this will be a bit disappointing for them. But as I say, they do have a beachhead now in Parliament and some legislatures, so it's up to them now to see how they go. Let's hope they stop some of the silly rhetoric about, that polling is this evil thing and it should be regulated and so on.
We'll mention the latest round of polling that the CRA conducted in October of last year. In that round of polling, our respondents, in terms of which party they would support, 46% opted for the ANC. Our margin of error was 3.9%, so quite a large margin of error. But it's interesting, even as far back as October and arguably before that, according to some other polling, had the ANC well below 50% in 2023 and 2022. All right, we've saved the easiest province for last, so we'll take a bit of a deep dive into KwaZulu-Natal and a whole range of questions related to KZN. So I'll put all of those to the both of you and try and make sense of them. So, of course, MK really outperforming, I think, expectations and predictions, 45.35%. The IFP growing slightly from 2019, when they were at 16%, to just above 18%, and the ANC at just under 17%. But especially those two showing you how tight things are, how close things are. For the IFP around areas like Ulundi, retaining a lot of influence and vote share in those areas. For MK, making a big impact even in your more urban metros like eThekwini, and growing quite substantially, of course. Not even growing, but just making a very strong initial impact. So Marius on MK, a few questions here. So let's talk a little bit the main push for MK to do so well in their first election. Some of the considerations, we talked earlier about some of them, but just to reiterate from your side, why we're seeing this sort of impact, especially in KZN.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of unhappiness in KwaZulu-Natal with the current ANC government. I think people also feel that Jacob Zuma has been poorly treated, and obviously him being a Zulu adds into that. The ANC also doesn't have any Zulus in the top 6 at the moment, I think. So that's also played a role there, I think. So a lot of this I think, comes down to the kind of ethno-nationalist vote. I'm not sure there are many people who've studied the MK manifesto closely and liked what they were saying, because maybe there are probably some people who did read and say, oh, this is great, but there's quite a bonkers manifesto. They want to get rid of the constitution and make South Africa parliamentary democracy again rather than a constitutional one. They want to create a kind of South African House of Lords with traditional leaders, having a say in how the country's governed and so on. It's basically trying to get us back to kind of a feudal system, which, it's. I don't think it's. If anybody reads it, you think, geez, like who wrote this? But it's as I say, I think it's mainly the Zulu ethnic factor, and I think MK is going to have a lot of work to do now to keep this momentum. I think there's going to be a lot of infighting, and I think once Jacob Zuma is not involved anymore, we must remember he's quite elderly. He's 82 years old, and I think for anybody, it's. He's probably in a stressful position, and I don't think he has the energy he had 10 or 15 years ago even. So I think once Jacob Zuma goes, I could see MK falling apart pretty quickly. But this all remains to be seen. And that all said, I think the IFP will be fairly happy with this, while I think the DA would be disappointed.